Tisha, thank you for joining me on the Invisible Condition podcast. You reached out to me through the power of social media. You found one of the posts, liked what it said, went to the website, sent me an email, and here we are recording today. So I really appreciate you taking the time and reaching out.
Well, I really appreciate you replying. Thank you for your time as well.
Yeah, you reached out and said, hey, maybe consider doing an episode on stiff person syndrome. And I honestly, I had never heard of stiff person syndrome before you reached out to me. And so before we get into that, why don't you tell us just a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you're up to?
Well, my name is Tisha Foster. I am born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I now live in North Carolina. I am a mom of two sons. I am a grandmother of a 6-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl. I'm an ex-model. Most importantly, I'm an author of my journey with God through stiff person syndrome. Stiff person syndrome is a rare neurological autoimmune disorder. I've been living with it let me rephrase it. It's been living in me for 13 years. And the reason why I say it's been living with me is because I no longer allow it to control my life, take over my life. I live life with by the grace of God. I get up in the morning and He give me grace, and I hit the ground running. Um, I'm not gonna say I am a Wonder Woman or anything, but I can do a lot more than most, and I'm grateful for that.
When we connected a few days before recording this, and what you said really stuck with me, and I've actually talked to a few people over the weekend, over the last few days about this, is it lives in me. I don't live with it. And then you
Mm-hmm.
talked about like, hey, if I could get rid of this, if I could evict it, sure I would. But
Mm-hmm.
it lives in me. It
Yeah,
doesn't define you.
it doesn't
And
define me.
that takes a tremendous amount of power, personal power, to
Mm-hmm.
come to that conclusion. Was it always that conclusion? Did you, when you're diagnosed, were you like,
No, and not at all. This took a lot of praying, um, just wanting to be a mom. I actually prayed for two things, which is people still today don't even understand. To wear heels. So they call me the bullhorn and stilettos now. So the bullhorn is me spreading awareness about stiff person syndrome. And the stilettos is I'm now wearing heels, which they were stripped from me um, when I was not exactly when I was diagnosed, but maybe 2, 3 years later into my diagnosis. I was an ex-model, so that no longer exists in my life because I couldn't wear heels. Not to
wow,
say models um, always have to wear heels, but I was that model that wore heels all the time. And not just the fact that I was a model, I liked wearing heels. Heels are, for me, it makes me walk different, look different, stand different, and make me feel different. Like every essence of a woman, I just loved heels. And and that's exactly how um, I knew that something was going on with my body in 2009
so you knew
because
something was going on, weren't
hmm
able to wear heels, which
exactly.
was your livelihood and a connection for
hmm
you. It was more than just putting on a pair of heels. It had some more personal meaning to you.
hmm Yeah, not just because
And
I was a model. I like the way I look. I like the way it
yeah.
made me feel. Yeah.
And so you were diagnosed with stiff person syndrome, but at the time it wasn't actually called stiff person syndrome.
It was called stiff man syndrome. So, but before that, they had diagnosed me because it was so rare, 2009, 10, 11. It was so rare. At first, they were saying it was 1 in a million. Now it's one in every two. To me, it's just a rare. It's just rare. I don't get into the millions and that it's rare. That's just it for me. Um, everybody choose their words different. I totally choose my words different from others. What gravitated me to you is because you use the word condition. I use the word condition because if it was a disease, then all the medication that they prescribe you with, you will be healed. But the medication can't heal you, stabilizes you. So it's a condition. That's just my opinion.
Hmm.
And as I always say, and not everybody want to hear my opinion, but I'm going to give my opinion whether you want to hear it or not because it lives inside of me. So that's my opinion. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So 2009, 2010, 11, in there working through the diagnosis, you were diagnosed with something else, right? You were diagnosed with
I was diagnosed. Okay, so it started. Okay, so um we have Thanksgiving, then we have Christmas, and then we have New Year's. So New Year's 2009, uh, right after New Year's, it was time to go to school. The kids go to school after New Year. My son he was in pre-K, and his aunt owned the center where he was attending school. So I would take him, which it was very convenient because I would take him right next door, but I had to take him up the steps to go to enter her house. And I went to go take him up the steps. I felt a little pain in my back, but when I went to go put my foot on that first step, I was like, dang, something is not right. But I'm thinking because I done partied in War Hills, um, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, just partying my life away. And then when it was time for me to step on the step, once I picked my leg up, I was like, wow, I just felt a sharp pain. And I'm like, this is something different. So I actually grabbed onto the banister and I just pulled my way up. And I told, she let him in. And I went down and I held on. And I said, you know what, maybe I should take off. And I was like, no, I'm just gonna go ahead and go to work. Boy, oh boy, that day was a wake up call because I had to take the subway. I was living in Brooklyn, New York at the time. I took the subway, and then I dropped my glove, and a gentleman tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, you dropped your glove." And I was like, "Oh, okay," and thought that I can bend down to pick it up, and that's when I realized, wow, something is really wrong because my body would not bend. I could not pick that glove up, so I left it right there and went to work. Got home, and my back was on fire. I'm like, what is going on? Tried it again the next day. Um, my godparents said to me, "Girl, if you're doing all of that, you need to stay home." And I'm like, yeah. Hmm. It's just that I party too hard, you know. I party. When you model, I wasn't a model every single day of the week. I still had a life. I still had children. So that, those couple of days that I'm gonna say that week. For that week, I continue, and as I do in this life right now, today, I just keep pushing. I just push and push and push, and I'll find a way, and I'll find a way, and I'll find a way. I just keep pushing. And I did that for a week until I was like, something is wrong. And then it went from my back to into my the trunk of my stomach. Then I began having stomach stiffness, muscle
wow.
stiffness, I should say, sorry, muscle stiffness. I'm like, all right, yeah. I went to I went to the doctor and they were telling me that I was in early stages of MS. They do have a little bit of a similarity, but They did that for 2 years. So we 2009, 2009. I was diagnosed 2011. So all this time they were treating me for early stages of MS. And then just with all extensive blood work, one day I can remember her face. She came back and she said, "You're not living with MS." Too many other things were progressing, especially with the spasms. I would have spasms so bad they would take me down to the ground. But what was spasms come with triggers, and one of the triggers living in New York for me was cold, cold, um, sudden noise, um, sudden startles. I would just hit the ground. Hit wherever I was. I couldn't have a spasm sitting in the chair. I couldn't have a spasm standing up. I would always have to be down on the ground. And where it would happen the most is in the shower. I guess it was the water running, the shower. In the shower and outside in the middle of the street where they're blowing the horns. And I would just fall and fall. I questioned it, but in hindsight, you're like, if if God would have left you, you wouldn't be here. Because every time I fell in the middle of the street, I never got hit by a car, but I was always under. So I was like, now I'll say, well, I should have been on my couch because every time I open my eyes, seen the engine. Like, yeah, so yeah, it just one thing about stiff person syndrome, it doesn't come alone. So I do, Graves' disease has crept in my body as well. Um, and I don't want, I just, I'm waiting for God to give me a completion of a healing. But I know that the enemy is riding me because I am blowing this bullhorn like never before. And I was even just diagnosed with borderline diabetic. However, what I'm being told is that I'm a tough case because they're testing the sugar that's in my body, and she's like, "There's no way um, you can be diabetic because there's no sugar and you're so thin." Um, but it's my gas; it's
Hmm.
not allowing my pancreas to produce um, what it's supposed to produce, the levels. So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, first off, thanks for sharing your story with me and with the Invisible Condition audience. You have a powerful story, right? You've gone from 3 years of diagnosis,
Hmm.
initially MS, to then being
Hmm.
diagnosed as stiff man syndrome. And, again, we were
Stiff
talking.
man syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm like, and then
And
they said stiff man syndrome. I'm sorry, stiff man syndrome. And um, oh, and then they was like, well, I'm confused because when we looked it up, it said it was a man heavy built, and he have to be, and he's athletic. Here it is. I'm a 5'9", 140 woman, and it's in my body. Where we going wrong? So, well, y'all must be wrong again. Go back, go back, do some more research.
I can imagine getting that diagnosis and looking at the person and just saying like, "No, that's wrong. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
last I
like
checked, I wasn't a man."
exactly. Like, go back and do some more research. What are you talking about? Like, what is it? Like, what? And then I remember the first thing I asked was, is it fatal? I asked, is it fatal? And they weren't even knee deep into that to where they couldn't even tell me whether it was fatal or not. I began researching it myself.
Hmm.
I have kids. Like, one of my sons were 4, and the other one was like 17. I'm like, hold on now, is this fatal? But yeah,
And here
they
you
wasn't
are.
even sure about that.
Wow.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, they've
Yeah.
now changed the name. I did a little bit of research, and it wasn't that long ago where they were like, actually, you know what? We're diagnosing more women than men, so
Mm-hmm.
we better change the name of this.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are at stiff person syndrome (SPS).
2024, we had SPS.
Yeah,
It went from stiff man syndrome, stiff person syndrome. They did. I'm like, oh, all right. I'm just gonna rock with it and roll with it.
you just know how it shows up in your body, and you just go along with it.
I
Yeah,
don't, but yeah,
yeah,
that's what you're supposed to do.
yeah. You're supposed to go along with it, but you're
Yeah,
like
I don't.
you're the opposite of that. You're just like,
I
no,
don't.
you set a goal, right? You said, I'm going to wear stilettos again.
Yeah.
And you're called the bullhorn and stilettos. You're telling people about stiff
Hmm.
person syndrome. You've been on media shows. You wrote a book about it. I want to talk about the book journey here in a minute as well, because I'm
Hmm.
fascinated about that. Oh,
Hmm.
and you wanted to get back in stilettos. Were you
I'm
ever
in
told
stilettos.
you're in stilettos? Were you
Yeah.
ever told that you won't be wearing stilettos ever again? Was that ever
Yeah.
told to you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was actually bedbound for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was bedbound for 3 years. I was bedbound. I was crawling. Okay, so again, living in New York, it's cold, and cold is a trigger. And I can remember, it was maybe so that happened in January, um, when I stopped working, and in February, like my body was basically, it was basically progressing in my body. My body was basically metamorphosing. So I'm gonna say February because it was snowing. So that's four. I still don't know what's going on at this point. I'm still with the MS basically. So MS, and I'm like, oh wow, it's cold. And I said, we got out the vehicle, and I said to him, I said, how would you feel about us playing a game? It's freezing outside. I know it's cold where you are as well, but it's freezing outside. And I'm like, how would you feel about playing a game? And he was like, what? It's like 9 o'clock. He done went to school. He tired. I'm like, let's crawl to the house and see who gets to the house the fastest. Um, he was excited, like, oh, okay. So we crawled. And that became my life for 3 years, crawling. I got different opinions um in 3 different states. So I
Wow.
crawled for 3 years. I was bedbound. Um, I was no longer, well, of course, when you bedbound, you're no longer driving, but being bedbound, and this is where I want to talk to anyone that's in my position or in any position. Being bedbound will lead you to a dark place, and I was in that dark place. Um, my mom, I'm an only child. My mom um, stepped up to take care of my baby boy, and I was becoming resentful against her because my prayer was to be a mom. When I had my first child, I was 20. I had my baby boy, I was 34. I was ready. I mean, yeah, I love both of my kids, but I was ready to be a mom. And then 37, it's like, what's going on? So, um,
I
yeah,
can imagine that
she
dark
was she was
place.
yeah, she was doing everything that I wanted to do that I didn't do at 20. And I was contemplating suicide, and I wasn't liking her. I didn't even like myself. I felt worthless, useless. Like, why am I even here? I'm just laying here. And I can remember thinking, she taking to school in the morning anyway, so I can't do nothing for him, even though I wanted to be his mom. And I was like, I'm just gonna take my own life. But I'm an only child, and I figured that wouldn't be fair to my children, nor my parents, not even to myself. Like, fight. I didn't know how to fight at first because I thought I had to do it on my own. Boy, oh boy, when I realized this was not my battle, I said, okay. So I turned over and I had a huge picture of me with my children that we had took at a studio. And I looked up at the picture and I said, I'm going to do it for y'all. And that's what I did. From that day, I knew I was not going to let stiff man syndrome, stiff person syndrome, SPS take me out. And what my son does now is when I get blood work back, he always watch my demeanor. He's always watching me, um, just to see. And when I get like now, they're telling me I'm borderline diabetic, and I'm like, okay, that's what y'all say. I ain't hear that, so I'm not claiming that. But a lot of times, I would say, by His stripes I am healed, and my soninger, because my son is the one who does all of the behind the scenes stuff for me. He said, "My sometimes you have to live in reality." I said, "I am. This is my reality." And he said, "No, because you will confuse people when you say I'm healed. But if you understand my faith, then you would understand where I'm going with it. By His stripes, I am healed, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to stand on that." Oh, why you? Oh, I was invited to a zebra prop party for someone else that is that's dealing with that. It's living inside of them as well. And I said to her, I said, I don't wear stripes. I don't want to be striped. I'm not gonna come to your party if stripes is what I have to wear. I'm not wearing the stripes. I mean, do I have good days and bad days? Yes. But I have more good days than I do bad days. I have 97% good days, and the bad days is like gone. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm healed.
Yeah, that story really resonates with me. 3 years ago is when my Crohn's came out of remission with vengeance, and
Mhm,
I'm a pretty active guy. I've got 2 young kids at home,
mhm,
and kids wanted to go outside and play, and I just had no energy to do it for so long. And I thought, this isn't the life that I envisioned for me and my kids, and for my wife, who was my primary caregiver.
mhm.
And those dark thoughts come in, and those dark thoughts start chipping away if you allow them. And I
Yeah.
allowed them for a
Oh.
while, and until one day, I still remember the day. It was a December, and I texted my pastor at my church and was like, I'm struggling. And he was at my house within 30 minutes, and walking. We went for a walk and we prayed, and I wasn't healed uh, from the perspective of Crohn's, but I
Mhm,
felt a weight lifted off of me.
mhm,
And that's when I really realized that, one, can't hide what we're going through. We need
mhm,
to step out vulnerably. Maybe we'll talk about
mhm,
that in a minute too. Is
mhm.
there's power in that. It's giving, not giving our condition a voice, but
Yeah.
it's uh, bringing voices into our condition to help minimize what's going on. And
Mhm.
two, that there's something greater at play than me in this world,
Yeah.
and there's things worth continuing on for. And that is, for me, it's, I look at my 2 little kids, and for you, you look at your little boy, and
Yeah.
your elderly son, and your only child. And here you are that bullhorn in stilettos. You're telling people, you are bringing awareness to this condition. And it takes a lot of vulnerability to not just reconcile that with yourself, to say, hey, it lives in me. I'm just going to stay quiet. If I have a bad day, I just stay home. But you went to the extent of writing a book. And I know
Yeah,
people who say, I'm going to write a book. I'm one of those people. I'm going to write a book. And I've never written a book, but I think
yeah.
I've started 3 copies, 3 different versions. But you went all the way into that. What made you step out vulnerably and say, hey, I am going to educate people in this?
You would not believe. So us, I know I'm not the only person. We try to bargain with God. I know I did. So I said, God, if you heal me, give me give me some of my life back. You know, I'll tell the world. I do travel a lot, but there was no way I can travel and tell the world. Like, come on, really. I put pen to paper. I put pen to paper, and it's so crazy when they say they laugh, they cry, they laugh, they cry. My family didn't have a clue. That's something else I didn't share neither. I didn't tell my family. I don't like pity parties. I didn't want the, oh, you need help over here, oh, you need help over here, oh, you need help over here. I need one person, and that's my Heavenly Father. He gonna get it done. And as Corinne said, he get it right the first time, so he don't have to double back.
Mm,
You don't have to double back twice because you get it right the first time. But yeah, other than me just trying to bargain with him, I told him I would tell the world, and so I had to figure out a way how I would tell the world.
mhm,
So that's how my journey with God, with stiff person syndrome, came about. Even with wearing heels, before that movie, War Room came out, I think it's War Room. I had a prayer closet and didn't even know that somebody else was thinking what I was doing. I literally took everything out my bedroom closet and I had a bunch of sticky notes all over the wall. And I would go in there on Saturdays and ask him, can I wear? I never stopped buying heels. I never stopped buying heels because I was determined to wear heels again because I loved the way it made me feel. I was determined to be this boy's mother because I asked for him. He was playing.
mhm.
So I used to go in the war room and I was like, listen, God, I'm gonna tell everybody, just can I wear these heels to church on tomorrow? And he would grant me. And the pastor says, Tisha, every Sunday you come here, you looking taller and taller, and he's so short, and he's looking up to me. He's like, you're looking taller and taller every time you come to church, and that's because God was grant that, and that's why I use the terms that I'm healed because everything that I ask Him for, He grants me.
I love that. Thanks for sharing
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
It's a powerful testimony. And I'm curious, do you have a favorite pair of heels? Or are all of
yep.
your heels your favorite?
All of my heels are my favorite, but there are two pair that I did not get rid of. Um, the pair that I wore to so you never read the book. That sucks. But the pair it's on the way. But the pair that I wore to church when I was living in Virginia. So when after I got diagnosed, that this is why I had to put it in the book because it's just layers to this stuff. So after I was diagnosed and I was diagnosed with Graves' disease. Graves' disease, I had a thyroid storm, which
Mm,
almost took my life. My mom came and said, nope, 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 you're coming with me to Virginia. My mom lives in Virginia. So she packed me up and took me and my kids to Virginia. In Virginia, all I was asking for was prayer. Even from the people I didn't know, like, oh, my mom and friends would come and be like, oh, and my mom's like, oh, my daughter's going through, you know, stiff man syndrome. And I was like, all I want is prayer. Like, because I don't like the pity party. Like, don't, ooh, oh, I didn't want that. No, I needed prayer. So one day in Virginia, I went to church and they took me out of church. into an ambulance because I was having a muscle spasm. And I was so mad at God. I was like, and that's why it's called my journey, because I was on a journey with him and he never left me. But I was so mad at him. I was like, all I wanted to do was get a word. All I wanted him to do was just pray for me. And that's how that came about. I was on a
Wow.
journey with him. Yeah. I thought he left
Yeah.
me. He never left me. He was just waiting on me to get it together. Like, listen, you need to get it together. So it's those, and it's a pair that my son bought me.
Hmm.
But do I have a closet full of heels? If I show you my closet, you would go insane.
So you promise you got to send me a picture of your closet full of shoes. I would love
Okay.
to put that up on the website when we post the
Okay.
episode, and
Okay.
because I think it's a testament to saying, hey, I'm not going to give this up. And um, you know, my journey with Crohn's, I used to be an avid mountain biker. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, close to
Mm-hmm.
a whole mountain range full of mountain bike trails. And I grew up on my bike and love mountain biking. And I was laying there and I didn't have energy to ride my bike. And I thought, I'm going to sell it. I'm just going to sell my bike and that's it. And, it sat in my garage. Here's this mountain bike worth way more money than I care to say. It was worth a lot.
I can
And
imagine how much a mountain bike is
yeah,
worth.
and so there it was sitting. It sat for almost 3 years. I would dust it off. I would put air in the tires. I would sit on it and then think, I don't have the energy to bike up a mountain, let alone ride this thing. And when I made a promise to myself that when I have surgery and when I get better, I'm not going to ride this bike anymore. And I ended up selling that bike, but I bought a bike that I could use with my kids, that I could ride. It's called a gravel bike. I could ride trails
Mm-hmm.
and really enjoy rather than this. And I miss my mountain. I miss being out there, but it was, okay, hey God, like I really want to bike with my kids. It's all I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up selling that bike. I used all that money and bought a new bike, and um, I won't sell it. Even if I outgrow it, it's just one of those things where it's like, that your journey, right? Those heels, they might be the most uncomfortable things. And in 5 years, 10 years, you're like, I can't wear these, but you will not get rid of them because
Yeah.
they hold that value to you. So yeah, I could
Yep.
completely relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And I'm curious. So the word vulnerability, this is a word that's been floating around in my mind for a bit. I've had a few conversations with people about vulnerability, the power of vulnerability. Why do I share openly? We heard a little bit of your story of why you share openly.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is living with an invisible condition and feels that call in their heart to say, but are afraid to, maybe there's shame, maybe there's past fear, maybe there's something going on in there, what would you tell that person? What would you say to someone who's listening and is feeling that calling to tell their story?
You're not alone. It's too many. This world is it's too many people that are dealing with the same thing. But how would someone know if you never say anything? That's from my own experience because I didn't tell anybody. So how would my family know if I if well they didn't know until it was too late. It was too late. It wasn't me telling them, it was the doctors telling them because I had a thyroid storm.
Yeah.
If you want to help someone, share. That's how you help other people, sharing.
What? So you held in your story, right? Your
I held
thyroid
it.
storm.
Right.
You
Me
held
saying
it
that.
in,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
what? It sounds like you almost had to share because the doctor said it to your
I had to share,
to your family. Um, what
but it
kept you
wasn't
from sharing?
fair. It's not fair. It's
Yeah,
not fair. Fear. It was the fear.
fear.
It was
Yeah,
fear. But for me, it was the fear of what to share. I didn't know what to share. I didn't know enough about it, and neither did they. I didn't know what to share. But I mean, that's a really good question. I
yeah.
mean, to share is the easy to say it is easy. Share it. because I'm sharing mine. But however, that's a really interesting question.
What is coming up for me, even as I ask the question, I squirm in my chair a little bit. 'Cause I'm like, don't ask me that question, anybody. But it's the same things as it's easy to say, oh, just share because I'm sharing my
Mm-hmm.
story, or you're
Right.
sharing your story. Previous
Yeah.
guests have
It's
shared their
easy.
story, so why not
Mm-hmm.
just share?
Mm-hmm.
What somebody said to me is, and you're alluding to it too, is what's that?
Backlash. Um,
Ah,
um, stereotype.
mm-hmm.
Um, that's what's coming to. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, the backlash, the stereotype, the
Yeah.
questions of, is this real? The questions of, are you sure? I keep hearing
Mm-hmm.
that over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over.
Mm-hmm.
And that I recently talked to somebody who said, I was, I have these conditions, and this is who I am. Right? This is I can't change the conditions I live with, and so um, I'm going to use the power of this to make my voice heard. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And they went on to say, you know what? I'm not defined by my conditions, but if I don't share, sometimes it could actually cause me some harm. This person has seizures. If she doesn't say, hey, I may have a seizure, um, then and here's what we can do about that, right? She also shares out of that sense of protection.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also heard from people of like, hey, maybe my story might help one more person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe seek diagnosis, seek help, because they haven't told a single person. And there is a power in our collective stories.
Yeah.
You know, would you agree with that? Like,
I
even by us
do.
sharing, I'm learning a lot about you and just your grit and determination. I'm like, I need some of that. I need some of what Tisha has.
I am determined. I'm determined to make them hear me, even for the ones that don't want to hear me. I'm a speak anyway. You're gonna hear me. It's inside of me. You're gonna hear me. We need help.
Yeah. If we don't, imagine a world where we were diagnosed with something and then just told not never to talk about it ever again.
Right.
That'd be terrible.
Have you ever been? Well, I've been turned away from, and I'm gonna call the name as well, from that was his name. Everybody run to him. I just went blank. He's in Maryland. Everybody,
Uh,
Dr. Newsom at John Hopkins. He turned me away because he said, and then I read a post a couple of days ago. He turned someone else away because their GAD levels weren't as high as he wanted them to be. So you got to be sick in order for him. Okay, so I discussed this with a doctor as well. So he wants your GAD levels to be really, really high because he want to deal with the sick people. And she was trying to get me to understand it, but to be turned away from a physician when you're going through something and all you looking for is help, he'll turn you away with no recommendation. So I read a post and this woman posted about it, and I've been talking about it in every interview. I've done tons of magazines, podcasts, talk radio. You can't. I can't say what he can't do. What I don't like that he does is he turns us away without saying, well, hey, you can go over here and try to seek help. He'll just turn you away. And this lady didn't have anywhere to go. She was asking, did anyone know of a neurologist? How you turn someone away because their GAD level is not as high as you want them to be, but they need help. Okay, you want to help the sick, but guide them and try to guide them at least. he'll turn you away, and it is what it is.
I've heard other stories of that.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a story of someone who battled 8 years to see a neurologist to get a diagnosis, and same thing, the levels weren't high enough, quote unquote.
Right.
Found a doctor. The doctor said, absolutely, we need to do surgery. And they showed me a picture of a scar, a recent scar right across their skull, to relieve pressure in their brain. For 8 years, they struggled with this. And so, I know doctors are busy, and if maybe doctors are coming up on the podcast, I have a few doctors coming up, and I think it's the level of self-advocacy we need to do on our own,
Yeah.
as well as also letting doctors know, hey, here's how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm grateful that that lady turned maybe to social media or wherever you saw her comment, because how many people don't?
Yeah.
Right? It takes that vulnerability to say,
Yeah.
I'm living with something. I need support. Anybody know anything? Like, even just to put that out there into the big scary world is so vulnerable. And yet, if we don't, nobody will ever know,
Yeah.
and we won't be able to help others.
Right.
And so there's so much power in our collected story. And as I look to wrap up, I always ask this for my guests. I'm going to ask you too, is when we think of the stigma that surrounds invisible conditions, how are we going to end the stigma? How are we going to change a world where our kids are going to grow up, your grandkids are going to grow up, where if they're living with something, they're not afraid to talk about it? And society, workplaces, schools will also embrace people who live with something that's invisible. How are we going to end the stigma?
What we're doing right now. We can't do no more than what we can do. What we're doing right now. Just spreading awareness and hoping that people, educate themselves more. And that's the most important part, is educating yourself. I mean, you can't see it. I think I even told you about we're trying to get different license plates to say, okay, we don't have the same blue license plate, because with the blue license plate you can see the the license plate. With the blue handicap flag, you know that there's a handicapped person or a person with a disability in the vehicle, or whatever. With a different color, oh, they have a disability as well, but you can't see it, but they're disabled. Like, you leave them alone as well. We have to start pushing for things like that. Like, what's the norm for a regular person that has a disability? We have to start coming up with things that say, hey, we over here. You can't see it, but we over here too. We need help as well. And whatever the people that have access to things like that, we need to, try to make it available to the ones that you can't see it, so that we
Uh,
can be treated, the same way, with the same respect, with the same attitudes, when you doing the same thing that a person that visible disability has. And we're not we're not turning the blind eye. I think for the most part that would help. I would
oh,
pray.
that resonates with me so much, right? You shared a story when we first connected. If you didn't touch on it today, I'll touch on it now just briefly, just about not being able to cross the street for 10 years. And
Oh,
because of,
I'm telling you, it's layers. It's so many
so,
layers to my
it's
story.
like, you know, you're not just like, there's the fear of crossing the street, but also that's when you said you also had a lot of stiffness and would fall
Mhm,
down. And
mhm.
as you even alluded to that, living in New York, like you could have been a mechanic, you're falling down, not getting run over by
Yeah,
cars, but you're like doing a inspection of the undercarriage of cars.
yeah,
And so having that accessibility to say, look, like I can't, like physically, you don't, I look quote unquote I don't like the word use normal. I look like an everyday person,
Hmm.
but
No,
yet there's
you could
something that's
normal.
inside me.
Normal would be the correct thing.
Yeah.
I look, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so before crumbs, you were normal. You, I mean, you still are normal. You're normal. It's
I'm
just that
normal.
something
This
lives
is my
inside of
normal.
you,
Yeah. This is my
right?
normal. And
And
that's
it
why
may take
yeah.
a little bit of accommodation to get from
Yeah.
here to there, but you're a
Yeah.
normal human being.
I think we're all normal. This is my
Yeah,
normal. Your normal looks different than my normal.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
we all have our own definition of normal. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I love that. The telling our story, educate. Before we connected, I hadn't done any research on stiff person
Mhm.
syndrome.
Mhm.
And I'm eager to read your book to further dive into your story to educate myself. I've done research. I'm going to link to a bunch of resources on the webpage as well, because that's how we end the stigma, is by
Yeah,
educating. And it doesn't take 6 months to do a course to learn about these conditions.
yeah.
Spend 10 minutes and educate yourself, so when you hear it,
Mhm.
you're not jumping to a bias of, oh, is this real? It's, oh, wow, tell me more.
Yeah,
Uh, and that's how we're
yeah,
going to change. So,
yeah, yeah.
so
Did you
yeah,
know? I'm sorry, Tim. Did you know? Well, being that you didn't know, you know Celine Dion was diagnosed, correct?
I do. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
Our,
yeah,
our famous Canadian singer,
yeah,
and also a fierce advocate. Uh, and so, we're going to continue to add voices to advocacy. And so,
yeah.
your book, I'm going to link it also on the website. I'm going to throw it out on social media as well,
That's
is
fine.
My Journey with God Through Stiff Person Syndrome. And so it came out in 2019. You can find that. I'll put a link out to Amazon. I think it's probably an accessible place for
It's
people
fine. Yeah,
to
yeah.
grab it. And I just thank you for,
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online. Yeah, you can get it on Barnes and Noble online.
so there you go. So there's no excuse not to learn about stiff person syndrome, as well as you got to connect with Tisha. What an amazing person.
Thank you. Me
I've had a
too.
couple interactions now, and I just can't wait to continue the conversation. I think
Yeah.
this is going to be the first of many, or the second of many now. And so
Book two.
thank you so
Yeah,
much
I'll
for
be
coming on.
back. Book two is coming out. I'm on chapter 13 now, I think, something like that. I'm on book two. I have a lot of stuff going on right now, so we'll definitely be in touch. I'll keep you updated. And listen, I'm blowing my bullhorn. I'm blowing my bullhorn.
I
My
love it.
bullhorn and stilettos.
Bullhorn and stiletto. So, thank you again for coming on. And for those who are listening, your support just means the world to me, whether it's through a donation or whether it's through subscribing to the newsletter to get updates, or just giving us a rating on wherever you listen to your podcast. That just helps us. It just helps spread this awareness, and
Yes,
in order to end this stigma, which is what we're going to do. So, for
right.
those who are listening, continue. And if you have ideas for shows or want to tell your story, reach out to me. Head to invisiblecondition.com, fill in the connect form, and I will get back to you very, very quickly. So, with that, I hope everyone has an amazing day. And Tisha, thanks again for coming on.
Stay blessed. Thanks, Tim.